So it looks like Microsoft had their time in the media, but their cracks are starting to show, and it's obvious. Let's get into the video. Let's talk about it. Yo, what's going on, guys? It's that guy Ken back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about how Xbox is on borrowed time. They've been in the media for the last year and a half, and people have been, elevating them and all this stuff, right? But the cracks are starting to show, and it's pretty obvious. But let's get into some of the details here, right? So basically, recently, a lot of people have been kind of getting on Microsoft because they haven't really had that much, coming out, essentially, at least this year anyway, right? They've pretty much gone a whole year without having really anything compelling that you would really consider to be kind of like a high quality game that, people are talking about in the media and so on and so forth, right? And you're starting to see people kind of like make that turn towards, okay, like Microsoft, what are you doing? Where are the games? Game Pass is great, right? It's a good price, but what's the point if there's really nothing in there that, makes us want to invest into the service and play it, whatever, right? If there's nothing compelling, essentially, right? But it's so funny, right? Now this is starting to happen, but people like me and other people in my circle and stuff like that, we saw this coming like a year and a half ago, man. We saw this stuff happening even from the very beginning. The problem was that the people were just kind of like elevating Microsoft and Game Pass superficially in the media. And there were some things that were kind of like helping them along, or whatever the case, right? And they did have help, and there were some moves that they made that, obviously did help. Like the fact that they bought Bethesda, right? Bethesda was a big thing that in the media, and a lot of people were on that. Although they didn't really have any new games that came with it, they did have an influx of games that came into Game Pass, right? And then we had games like MLB, which obviously we know is a first-party exclusive, or was a first-party exclusive game that went into Game Pass, right? Death Stranding just went into Game Pass not too long ago, a few months ago, so on and so forth, right? People were pushing the fact that Game Pass was cheap and the Xbox had so much power, and then obviously last year, right, they had their showcase where they had announced a shit ton of games. I mean, a lot of them, right? And people were it was like Microsoft was just up in the media at the time because of all these things that was, essentially going on, right? And to make it even worse, Sony was having issues, right? They were actually having some legitimate issues in terms of like, getting their supply out. I think that was pretty much like the main one. But, there were other issues like the console didn't launch with certain features, so on and so forth, right? They just had raised the price for their games. So a lot of people were basically down on Sony because of some of these things that they were happening. But amongst those, like some of those legitimate issues, there were people who were just coming up with bull crap, essentially, right? Just because it was cool. It was cool to, gang up on Sony, right? And that's what made the click, right? That's what gave people the clicks or whatever, right? The fact that there wasn't enough exclusives, right? Which it wasn't true, obviously, because they were literally the only freaking console who were giving exclusive games at the time, right? And then we heard a lot of stuff about Sony not supporting indie developers. We had some indie developers come out and talk about like how, their games weren't getting showcased on the front case and all this other stuff, right? No context. It just happened, right? And Sony was just this monster of a company or whatever, right? Whole thing about backwards compatibility, not supporting legacy titles, not wanting to, maintain your older legacy type games, right? Focusing too much on AAA, no variety in the games. It was crazy, man. Bro, we even had Screwgate, right? People were complaining about having a screw going into the platform, right? The stand for the PS5. It was ridiculous, right? And like I said, Microsoft had hit their momentum and people were like up in the media, and it's funny because all of these issues that they're having right now, they were all present then. It's just that a lot of people were glossing over it because of all of these things that I mentioned before. People were kind of just giving the Microsoft passes because, you know, they were making some of these moves with Game Pass and the acquisitions. And right now is the whole thing with the Blizzard acquisition and stuff like that, which even that by itself is not providing any new games, right? Which is strange to me, but people are still, you know, trying to champion that as well, right? But like I said, man, all of that was on borrowed time. Because really, when you look at it, they didn't really change their position that much, right? Because even with the acquisition for Bethesda, right, for example, like I said, they didn't have any new games that were announced at the time. The two games that we know of that came from Bethesda were on PlayStation first. It wasn't until we started learning about Redfall and Starfield, which, by the way, we know those two games were delayed, right, that they started to have at least something, right? But other than that, there wasn't really anything there. There was no roadmap, essentially, right? And the only roadmap that we had were those games that they had announced. Games like Perfect Dark, games like State of Decay 3, Hellblade 2, so on and so forth, right? All of those, we all know what they are. Avowed and Outer Worlds 2 and all that stuff, right? The problem with those games were they didn't have any information, right? So it's cool to talk about it, right? Yeah, we have all of these games announced, but we don't know when they're coming out. We don't know anything about them. We haven't seen any gameplay. You know, most of them had CGI trailers, which didn't really showcase anything about the game itself. And at the time, there wasn't really anything that was super compelling in Game Pass or whatever the case is, right? But anyway, all of this stuff is starting to catch up now, and people are really starting to see, like, this is really what the reality of the situation is, right? A lot of those games that they announced, we don't know when they're coming. A lot of the games that had came out kind of went and gone, right? Some of the ones that were exclusive or timed exclusive are now on other platforms. Games like Halo Infinite, they're in turmoil and they're having a lot of issues. Forza Horizon 5 is great, but, you know, you can't survive off of one game, let alone a game that you've had for generations at this point. So you need something new to kind of break everything up. And like I said, I was looking at all of this crap and I thought it's only a matter of time before people start to realize that all of this stuff that they were doing was very superficial. Very superficial. That people are going to realize essentially that Microsoft's position hasn't really changed, even with all of the moves that they made, especially with all the hate that Sony was getting. To me, it was completely unsubstantiated, but people are now starting to realize that this is really what's happening. Paul Tossi just came out with an article a few days ago about how, you know, Sony is hitting it hit after hit after hit after hit, right? And Microsoft has yet to catch up or whatever. Same guy, right, who was in the media last year talking about like how he doesn't understand why he should keep his PS5, essentially. Because why? Because I have Game Pass and Xbox. I don't like the guy. I mean, I don't know the guy. I don't like his journalism. I don't like, you know, what he says on in the media. But you can see like how the turning of the tides are, especially now that Sony is starting to come out with even more and more of their games, and they're really starting to like hit in the media. You know, God of War just came out. I mean, God of War is coming out in a couple of days, and the reviews have already hit, and it's getting rave reviews, a lot of attention, and all of that, right? We know Spider-Man is coming out, and there were a bunch of other games that had came out, Horizon, you know, GT7 and whatever, Demon Souls and all this stuff, Ratchet and Clank, Returnal, right? This is just a long list of games that had came out for the PlayStation 5 in comparison, right, to what Microsoft is doing, that's making it appear, or maybe even not just appear, right, but making it even more apparent, right, that what Microsoft is doing is just essentially not working. And I just think it's very interesting. And like I said, the cracks are starting to show. People are starting to realize the truth is really starting to hit and it's starting to set in. And people are acting surprised. They're acting surprised like nobody saw this coming, right? I'm like, dude, if you just looked at the freaking details, you would see what would happen. It's not that hard. It's not rocket science. You don't have any info on your games. The acquisitions that you had didn't really bring anything. All the games that you had are delayed. I mean, what other logical conclusion can you come to other than Microsoft is in the same goddamn position that they were when they started this shit? Anyway, that's all I had to say about this, guys. I don't really have anything else to say. If you like the video, make sure you like, share, subscribe, leave a comment in the comment section, hit that notification bell, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.